Hey, we're back for a fourth lesson in our second unit, and we're going to be talking about factors that impact supply. And this is going to be, unfortunately, another little long one. There's a lot of information to cover, but this is also one that in the past students have struggled with. So hopefully when you have this extra resource, you can go ahead and use it to review, and you won't have those problems when it comes test time to figure out what exactly you need to do. So let's get to our learning targets for today. Here's what I want you to be able to accomplish. I need you to explain the difference between a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. We're going to explain how to determine a change in supply. This basically goes back to a lot of the concepts that we covered in demand. It's very similar. You'll see a lot of relationship here. Analyze the factors that can cause a change in supply and describe the impact they can have. So basically, let's go ahead and get into it here. A change in quantity of supply versus a change in supply. This is very, very similar to what we talked about with the demand factor. So we're talking about how did the change in quantity of supply occur. We're just talking about how much did the quantity change due to a change in price. So here we can see, at $100, they were willing to make 1,000 of them, and then when we get to 50, they're only willing to make about 500 of them. So we're just simply talking about how did the quantity change along the supply curve. So if you can basically read a line graph, you can figure those things out. So let's move into the next one. We know that basically a change in supply is going to create a brand new supply curve, just as a change in demand caused basically an entirely new demand curve. So let's see the 6 factors that can cause a change in supply. Those are going to be a number of producers, producer expectations, which actually works very similar to consumer expectations. We've got technology, labor productivity, government action, and input costs. Let's go ahead and take a look at the first one. We're going to talk about number of producers. The more producers there are in the market, the greater supply there will be, and the opposite is true as well. So basically what happens is if someone becomes successful at making something, that inspires other people to basically start making the same thing. So if Chrysler was the very first car company, I don't know if it is or not, I'm just using that as an example, and people saw that they were a successful company. Let's say they're only making 100 cars a day. That's like the most they can make. And then Ford Motor Company comes along and they're like, well, I want to make cars too. And let's say that they make 100 a day. Well, now our supply has gone up to 200 per day. And then General Motors, they decide to get in the game. And Kia and Honda, let's say they all go ahead and make 100 cars a day, just to try and keep this simple. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies, 100 cars a day. So you can see basically I'm up to 500 a day at this point. So let's say that let's say Honda and Kia, maybe they don't do very well selling cars and they go out of business. So the supply is going to go down because the cars that they used to provide to the marketplace in terms of supply, well, they're gone now. So as you can see, that as producers leave the marketplace, that supply is also going to go down. Let's get into producer expectations now. And basically, they're going to adjust the production of what they make based on what they think will happen with price. That's why I included this right here. Producers are all about that dollar sign in their eye. And this one is a little trickier because it can go a number of different ways. So let's take a look at some things here. I'm going to leave the wheat one for the last one. The PlayStation 2, you know why they don't make PlayStation 2s anymore? It's because the price that they could sell it for is too low, so they don't make it anymore. Basically, we go back to that first lesson in supply where we talk about have to have a willingness to make it. Well, the price has gotten so low that they've cut back their production entirely on it. So that's kind of like an extreme one. And then according to the Google search I did for pictures, this is supposed to be the brand new iPhone. So what Apple has done is they know that this is going to have a high price tag, so they are throwing in as much of their production as possible behind that compared to perhaps what they're doing with their iPhone 7s. They might still make some iPhone 7s because there'll be enough demand for it that it'll be worth them going ahead and making some. But for the most part, they're going to go ahead and make the iPhone, the brand new one, because that's going to be what fetches the highest price. Now here comes the tricky one here. Wheat. Well, I can't just go out and make some more wheat. So what people will do in this case, like a farmer, if I anticipate that the price of wheat is going to go up, I'm going to actually hold back my wheat. So the supply would actually go down because I'm waiting for that price to go up. And then once the price is up, obviously I release that wheat into the marketplace to be sold because it's at the higher price. So that's when we talk about food and things like that, things that can't be easily produced, that's when you'll hold it back in that particular case. The other thing too, if you thought the price was going to drop with the wheat in the upcoming weeks or so, you would probably try and get as much of the wheat that you have in your possession out to the marketplace to try and sell it at that high price. Let's get into technology. Technology is pretty easy. When a company invests in technology that can increase production, the amount of supply will increase as well. Let's take a look at our two pictures here. They're pretty self-explanatory. Could you imagine if I made all clothing by hand? How long would that take? It would take, I can't even imagine because I have no desire to do that. But let's just say that we're trying to compare sewing things by hand to all of a sudden buying a sewing machine. So I would be so much faster because the technology allows me to put more out with the sewing machine in this particular case. The amount of clothes that I can make, the supply of those, will also go up. Now, I can't ever think of one that would cause me to go down. I've been teaching this for a few years now. I've never been able to talk to another teacher that's been able to explain this to me. I can't see one going down because the whole purpose of being in business for the most part is to make money. And I can't see a business investing in technology that would actually cause them to produce less. That would just, it seems ridiculous. So we're just going to say that for the time being, you can't have a decrease in technology, I guess, unless it breaks. I mean, that would be one. If the machine just breaks and I got to go back to doing things by hand in this particular example for the short time, then yeah, that would be one that applies, but we're not really going to look into that too much. Let's get into labor productivity. How productive am I? So you can see in the upper left, this guy is not very productive. We can see on the upper right, we have one guy who is very productive. He has a small stack of things sitting on his particular desk, and the guy on the right isn't very productive because he's sleeping. So basically, how do I go from being not productive to productive? So you can see down here in the lower left, this guy, they put some extra arms on him and hands because he can multitask. And this woman here, she's on the phone, and someone's handing her a phone, and she's on her laptop, and someone's handing her a box, someone's handing her a tablet, someone's handing her some mail, and she got a stack of files behind her. How is she able to do all these things? So basically, it normally comes through what I have in the middle to try and bridge that is going to be some sort of special training. The example I usually use in class is, imagine if I have a worker in a factory who's been sitting there and he is, very good at his job because he's been at it so long, and then he quits. So now I'm like, great. Now I got to hire this guy off the street that has no experience. Is he going to be as productive as that guy who worked there for 15 years? Probably not. There's a chance he could be, but very likely that person will not. So I would have to provide him with some training, and the more training that he gets, the more productive he'll be. And the better you are at a job, the more efficient you become, and the more efficient you become, the more you can output, or more output you have, basically the more you can make. So government action, this one can be a little tricky too. So this is basically when the government makes the product more expensive. They can do this in a number of different ways. When we have cigarettes down here and alcohol in the lower right, that's normally done through a tax. So what happens is producers won't make as much cigarettes and they won't produce as much alcohol because the price of goods and services, the price of those two particular goods will go up. And when the price of goods goes up, we know that from the law of demand, that demand will go down. So we also refer to those in some cases as sin taxes. Because it's not illegal to smoke. Obviously, if you're 18 or older, you can do that. And for the alcohol portion, it's 21 or older. So neither of those are illegal, but they're not necessarily encouraging those actions. So you can almost apply the incentives portion on there that we talked about, trying to get you to do things you wouldn't normally do. If you're a smoker, things that you would normally do is smoke. So if the price is too high, maybe you won't do that. So that's how the incentive portion goes in there. Some other things too, this kind of plays into input cost too, but it's directly tied to government action. We see a factory here in the upper right, and it's got a lot of pollution. And I use that because I always go to this example when I teach. My father works for a steel company, and the government puts all these types of regulations and laws in place that make the steel company follow certain guidelines as far as how much pollution they can have in the air. And it costs so much money for them to do it. We're talking millions, if not tens of millions of dollars each year to basically follow these rules. Now just imagine if they didn't have to do that. Of course, two things would happen. One, the amount of pollution would be unimaginable to me. You basically probably look like those old views of California with all the smog in the air. But the other thing that would happen is if you took those away, imagine if I had tens of millions of dollars extra in my pocket as a producer. I can go out and spend those on the factors of production. I can buy more natural resources. I can buy more labor. I can buy more capital. And I can turn those into supply. So I could take that money and actually make more of what I intended. So we have things where government action could increase supply, and it can decrease supply. In most cases, it's decreased supply. We see some things now with the current Trump administration. They are trying to go ahead and reduce some of the regulations, which that technically should free up some resources in order to try and increase supply. But that's not really what we're focusing on as far as the lesson today. We're not talking about Trump and his actions yet. All right, so input costs. I love this one. If the materials or production costs increase, then the amount of supply I can make decreases. The opposite is also true. So what I'm looking here right now is it's going to cost me $1. What was it? It's $1.74 when you add up all those together. So let's think of it here. Let's say that I've got $100, and I did the math, so you don't have to worry about it. So with $100, I can make 57 hamburgers. And so, that's what I've got. So let's say that just the hamburger patty goes up by 20 cents. So if you have a 20-cent increase in just the beef, I can't make 57 hamburgers anymore. My supply goes down to 51. So as you can see, an increase in input cost means that I can't make as much. In this case, I go from 57 to 51. Now the opposite's true too. If I have just a 5-cent decrease in beef, I go from 57 hamburgers to 59. So basically, it's pretty easy. If it becomes cheaper to make it, I can make more. If it becomes more expensive to make it, I will then make less. So let's get into shifting. It's pretty much the same thing as what we talked about when we talked about demand. If we're going to have an increase in the change, then the curve will shift to the right. If supply is going to decrease, then we're going to have a shift to the left. And this basically works the same way as we did in the other ones. Think to yourself, or maybe pause the video and draw the graph yourself if that helps you. I'm going to give you a product, I'm going to give you a factor, and I'm going to give you a scenario. And let's see if you can figure out which way this shift is supposed to occur. Remember, if you think that there's going to be a greater supply, we draw that new supply curve to the right. And if you think there's going to be a smaller supply, then you draw that supply curve shifting to the left. All right, our first one's going to be cakes, and we're going to talk about input costs. A disease has started killing chickens, and the cost of eggs has increased. Well, we just went over the input cost one, and I talked about how if the price increases, that I'm going to make less of something. So our curve should look like this. We got a supply curve on the right. That would signify our original one, and now we're making less. Again, the supply curves, the quantities and the price, don't worry about them. I just made the same one for everyone. Nobody is going to sit there and buy cakes at $45. Wedding cakes maybe, and that'd be a cheap wedding cake, by the way. So this is just to basically emphasize the point of which way the curve is supposed to go. Let's get to the next one. We're going to do handmade purses, and it's labor productivity. So basically, craftsmen learn a new technique that helps them produce 10% more purses a day. And the key here is it says more. So when it's more, I'm going to have an increase in supply. That's going to shift to the right. So hopefully you got that correct. The next one we're going to do is we're going to talk about technology, oil production. scientist has created a new and more efficient way to drill for oil. When you are more efficient, that means you can make more of it. So that means we're going to have a shift to the right. So hopefully you had that one down. Our next one is going to be number of producers. So product is cars, factor is number of producers, and a recent rise in sales for sports cars has motivated other manufacturers to enter the market for them. So this actually plays into the example I had earlier. So with more producers, more producers in the marketplace, we now have a higher supply curve. So hopefully you shifted that to the right. Got one more coming up here. We're going to do government action. We kind of already covered this, but let's see if you can do it anyways. The product is steel. The factor is government action, and the scenario is that basically we have to add on some more pollution controls because of increased government regulations, and that's going to increase my costs by about 10%. So this one, actually, as I'm looking at it right now, don't pay attention to this one so much. This I flipped around. This is going to be a problem here. And I'm not going back and redoing this one. It's 17 and a half minutes in. Too bad. So this one is actually the opposite. We should have had S2 over on the left and S1 over on the right. I don't know what happened there. That's too bad. I'll have to... Well, I'm not going to fix it because I don't want to record this thing over again. All right, so let's do this one. Wheat availability, producer expectation. A farmer anticipates the price of wheat to increase in the coming weeks. And I don't know what's going on here. I fixed these and now they're not really fixed, but that's okay. We're just going to roll with it anyways here. So this is going to be another one that has to be switched. Our supply would be going down actually. So my mistake. This should go over to the left. So this should be S2 on the left and S1 over on the right. We got one more to go here. Hopefully I didn't mess this one up, but I can see on the preview slide I didn't mess this one up, so, you know, a little 3, 2, 1 clap for myself there. Product is going to be Crayola Crayons. Our factor is going to be producer expectations. Our scenario is Crayola knows that the school year is approaching and people will want to buy more of their products. This means that they will be able to charge a higher price. So what are they going to do? They're going to basically make a bunch of crayons so they can get them out into the marketplace. So I'm going to say in this particular case, we're going to have an increase in supply. So hopefully you got through my 2 mistakes. I hope they were just 2, at least that I caught. They were just with the graphing portion. I can't believe that happened, so shame on me. So learning targets, let's see if we can go back, take some time, see if you can do the 3 of them. If you can, there's nothing that I can really get into on the test or the quiz you might be having coming up soon. If you can do all 3, then you can basically answer anything. We'll see you next time. Next one's going to be, I'm going to combine 2 lessons actually. I'm going to basically do elasticity of supply and elasticity of demand all in one. You know, it's a short lesson, so there's really no point in making 2 videos. We'll see you when we get around to that. Till next time.